Daniel had always been different from the people around him. While most humans were content living their entire lives in familiar cities and quiet towns, Daniel dreamed of distant worlds, unknown civilizations, and the endless mysteries hidden among the stars. From a young age, he devoured every piece of information he could find about planets beyond the reach of ordinary explorers. He imagined walking beneath alien skies, meeting species with completely different histories, cultures, and ways of thinking. But his curiosity was never just about advanced technology or strange landscapes. It was about understanding. How could life be so different across the universe, yet still share the same hopes, fears, and desires? That question fascinated him more than anything. Then one day, he heard the news. At first, he thought it had to be a mistake. A planet far beyond human-controlled space had announced a challenge unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The alien queen of that world, a ruler whose name was spoken with respect and fear across multiple galaxies, was offering a chance at something impossible: marriage. But only to someone who could survive and complete a series of legendary trials. Trials that had existed for centuries. Challenges designed to test intelligence, courage, strength, and the very nature of a person's character. No one had ever succeeded. Countless warriors, nobles, and champions from powerful civilizations had attempted them. Almost all had failed. Some never returned. Others were remembered only as warnings. To many, the idea that a human could even try was nothing more than a joke. Humanity was young, unknown, a small civilization compared to the ancient powers of the galaxy. But Daniel didn't see it that way. He didn't see an impossible challenge. He saw an opportunity. The announcement spread rapidly through interstellar communication networks, reaching thousands of worlds. Across the galaxy, millions watched. Some laughed. Some doubted. Some were curious. Because for the first time in history, a human had stepped forward to face the Queen's impossible trials, and his name was Daniel. The Queen was known for her intelligence, beauty, and unshakable pride. Her challenges tested not just physical strength, but courage, wit, and character. Daniel studied every detail he could find. Reports, sketches, intercepted messages from alien observers, but much of it was cryptic. The trial's rules were unusual, as the Queen had designed them to filter out anyone who relied only on power or aggression. She wanted someone clever, someone kind, someone who could think beyond the obvious. Even before he left Earth, Daniel faced skepticism. Friends and colleagues warned him. It's impossible, they said. No human could survive that planet, let alone succeed in her challenges. It's suicide. But Daniel's response was always the same. Curiosity outweighed fear. He believed that courage was not about ignoring danger. It was about facing it with a clear mind and an open heart. The journey itself was long and exhausting. Daniel traveled through space in a small exploration ship, equipped with only the most essential supplies. He had no weapons, no army, only his intellect, training, and a heart full of determination. As he approached the alien planet, he was struck by its sheer beauty and strangeness. Unlike Earth, the skies were tinted with colors that changed every hour, as if the atmosphere itself were alive. The ground beneath him shimmered faintly, reflecting light in ways that made the terrain look like liquid glass. Towering structures made of materials he could not name rose toward the sky, spiraling in shapes that defied gravity. When Daniel finally landed, he was greeted not with hostility, but with cautious curiosity. The alien guards, creatures tall and graceful with luminous eyes and skin that shifted color, examined him carefully. They had seen humans before, but never one willing to participate in the Queen's trials. Their expressions were a mixture of doubt and intrigue, as though they could sense that Daniel was different. He met their gazes calmly, showing no fear, only respect. His confidence and humility were qualities rare among the contestants. The Queen's palace was unlike anything Daniel had imagined. It seemed to grow out of the planet itself, a living structure that pulsed gently with energy. The walls were smooth and reflective, the corridors wide enough to allow for multiple beings to pass at once without crowding. Daniel felt small in the enormous spaces, but he also felt a strange sense of belonging. There was a rhythm to the palace, a sense that every element had a purpose, every shape a story. The first public appearance of the contestants was held in the palace's grand hall. Hundreds of aliens from many species had gathered to witness the beginning of the trials. The hall itself seemed to stretch endlessly, with a high ceiling that glimmered like the night sky. When Daniel entered, all eyes turned to him. He could feel their surprise, their judgment, and their curiosity. Many whispered to one another, questioning why a fragile human would dare to stand among them. Daniel ignored the murmurs. He had no need to prove himself to the crowd, only to the queen. When the alien queen appeared, the room fell completely silent. She moved with grace and authority, her presence commanding attention without a word. Her eyes were sharp, yet they seemed to study Daniel in a way that made his heart race. There was intelligence there, yes, but also a hint of amusement, as if she were quietly testing him already. When she spoke, her voice was melodious, yet firm. She described the challenges in detail, each more difficult than the last. Daniel listened carefully, absorbing every word, noting the subtleties that others might overlook. The first trial would test intellect, the queen explained. It was a puzzle centuries in the making, designed to challenge logic, observation, and creativity. Many aliens had tried and failed, some for days, others for months. Daniel felt a spark of excitement rather than fear. This was the reason he had come, to prove that a human could meet the impossible with cleverness and heart. That evening, before the trial began, Daniel walked alone through the palace gardens. Strange plants glowed softly in the dark, their shapes twisting in impossible ways. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the endless nights staring at the stars, the months of preparation, the courage it had taken to leave his home planet. He realized that this challenge was not just about winning the queen's hand. It was about discovering his own limits, and perhaps redefining what others thought humans were capable of. As night fell, Daniel prepared mentally for the trial. He knew that the first step would set the tone for everything that followed. If he failed immediately, he would not be remembered. But if he succeeded, even partially, he could earn respect and perhaps a chance to continue further. He reminded himself that intelligence was not enough. Patience, observation, and integrity would matter more than raw strength. When the doors to the trial hall opened the next morning, Daniel stepped inside. His heart pounded, but his mind was clear. He had trained himself for years to face challenges far beyond ordinary human experiences. He looked around at the other contestants, all of whom were powerful, confident aliens, and he felt no fear. Instead, he felt determination and calm focus. The first trial was about to begin, and though no one could yet imagine the outcome, Daniel's presence alone was already making history. Here was a human, small and fragile compared to the towering aliens, ready to take on a challenge that had defeated the greatest minds and warriors of the galaxy. No one knew what would happen next, but one thing was certain: everything was about to change. The morning of the first trial arrived, and the palace was alive with anticipation. Daniel stood among the contestants, his eyes scanning the vast chamber before him. The hall was enormous, with a floor that seemed to stretch endlessly, and walls that shimmered with strange moving patterns. At the far end, a series of complex structures and devices awaited the participants. Each was unique, designed to challenge the mind in ways Daniel could only begin to imagine. The queen observed silently from her elevated throne, her eyes sharp and curious, studying each competitor's movements and reactions. The first trial was not about strength or speed, it was a test of intelligence, logic, and perception. Each contestant was presented with a series of ancient alien riddles and symbols, written in a language that had been considered uncrackable for centuries. The symbols shifted and changed subtly as one stared at them, almost as if they were alive. Most contestants froze immediately, their minds struggling to comprehend the moving puzzle. They had trained for physical battles or diplomatic negotiations, but nothing had prepared them for this type of challenge. Daniel, however, felt a strange thrill. He had spent years studying alien languages and codes, learning to recognize patterns and think outside the box. As he approached the first set of symbols, he focused intently, letting his mind slow down and absorb every detail. The other contestants whispered among themselves, puzzled by the calm demeanor of a human who seemed so fragile in comparison to their imposing forms. Yet Daniel's focus was unshakable. He knew that success would require patience, creativity, and observation, not brute force. The first puzzle involved matching sequences of symbols in a way that would unlock a hidden panel. Most aliens tried to guess, pressing symbols randomly or attempting to rely on strength to trigger the mechanism. Daniel, however, noticed subtle clues, tiny differences in the shapes, a slight glow in certain symbols, the rhythm of movement that others had ignored. He carefully traced the patterns, testing possibilities slowly and methodically. Minutes passed, and some contestants grew frustrated, muttering complaints and giving up entirely. Daniel remained focused, adjusting his approach as he recognized the logic behind the shifting symbols. The Queen watched him closely, her expression unreadable. She had seen thousands of contestants fail at this very stage, and yet here was a human, small, unfamiliar, and seemingly ordinary, beginning to unravel what had defeated generations. Daniel did not notice the attention he was drawing, or him. The trial was not about impressing anyone. It was about understanding the puzzle and staying true to his method. He felt a deep satisfaction as the first panel clicked open, revealing the next layer of the trial. A few spectators gasped quietly, whispering to one another. It was rare, almost unheard of for a human to succeed in even the simplest part of the challenge. The second puzzle was even more complicated. It involved a three-dimensional maze of symbols and moving light where patterns shifted every few seconds. Competitors had to predict the next movement of each pattern and adjust accordingly, solving the sequence before time ran out. Many of the aliens attempted to brute force the maze, moving quickly but without understanding. Daniel, on the other hand, slowed down, observing the rhythm of the changes. He noticed repetitions and small clues in the light patterns, then used them to anticipate the next shift. Step by step he progressed, solving the maze with careful precision. By now, murmurs among the spectators had grown louder. Aliens were whispering in disbelief, pointing at the human who had advanced farther than anyone expected. Some advisors of the Queen exchanged worried glances, as they had assumed no human could reach this stage. Daniel, however, did not feel pride or arrogance. He was focused, calm, and driven by curiosity. Each step of the puzzle was a lesson, a new way to understand the alien culture and their methods of thinking. The final part of the trial required combining logic with creativity. Contestants were given a set of materials, alien crystals, rods that changed color under heat, and strange liquid compounds, and were asked to create a structure that could generate a specific energy pattern. Many competitors failed immediately. Unable to imagine the solution, they were accustomed to traditional methods, but this challenge required original thinking. Daniel studied the materials carefully. He noticed that certain crystals aligned naturally with specific rods when exposed to the alien light in the room. Using his observations, he experimented, testing combinations with patience and precision. Slowly, the structure began to resonate, producing the energy pattern required to complete the trial. A wave of quiet amazement swept through the chamber. The Queen's advisors exchanged astonished glances, muttering among themselves. A human, a being they had considered weak and fragile, was solving challenges that had defeated countless alien geniuses. Daniel finished the trial without a single moment of hesitation, his focus never breaking. The final symbol of success lit up, indicating that he had completed the trial entirely on his own. The Queen rose from her throne, her eyes studying Daniel more closely than ever. She walked slowly toward the center of the hall, her movements graceful and deliberate. "You have completed the first trial," she said in a voice that resonated through the chamber. "I must admit, I did not expect this. Most humans would have given up within moments, yet you have proven something remarkable." There was a pause, a subtle tension in the air. The spectators held their breath, unsure of how the Queen would proceed. Daniel bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said. "I did my best to understand the challenge. It was a privilege to attempt it." His humility impressed even the Queen, who had seen many contestants boast or demand praise. She nodded slightly, a faint smile appearing on her lips. It was the first sign of warmth Daniel had observed in her during the trials. That evening, after the trial concluded, Daniel reflected on what had happened. He felt relief, but also anticipation. The first test had been a success, but he knew the trials would grow more difficult. There would be physical challenges, tests of courage, and trials of character. He also realized that he had begun to earn the respect of those around him. The Queen, the advisors, and even some of the spectators had begun to see that Daniel's intelligence and calm determination were extraordinary. As night fell over the shimmering planet, Daniel gazed at the alien sky. The stars above seemed brighter than any he had seen from Earth, and the colors of the planet glowed softly beneath him. He understood that this was only the beginning. The first trial had tested his mind, but the journey ahead would test everything about who he was, his courage, his heart, and his integrity. Yet Daniel felt ready. He had faced the impossible once, and succeeded. He was prepared to continue, knowing that each challenge would bring him closer to understanding not just the alien world, but himself as well. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. He was a human far from home, competing in a trial that had defeated thousands, and he had proven that being different did not mean being weak. The first step of the journey was complete, and already everything was changing. The eyes of the galaxy were upon him, and he had shown that a human could rise to a challenge that seemed impossible. After the first trial, Daniel felt a surge of confidence, but he also knew that the challenges ahead would be far more demanding. The second phase of the Queen's tests was designed not for intelligence alone, but for courage, endurance, and emotional strength. The contestants were taken to a vast expanse outside the palace, a region known as the trial grounds. The landscape was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Mountains floated in the air, rivers of liquid light flowed between, jagged rocks and enormous plants grew in spirals that defied gravity. Strange sounds echoed from every direction, making it difficult to judge distance or direction. This was a world that tested every sense, every instinct, and every ounce of bravery. Daniel studied the environment carefully. Many contestants hesitated. At the edge of the first hazard, a narrow bridge suspended over a glowing chasm. Their fear was visible, some even turning back. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped forward. He had learned to trust his instincts, to observe carefully, and to act calmly, even under pressure. Step by step, he crossed the bridge, feeling the alien light shimmer beneath him. It was unstable, shifting slightly with every movement, but he adjusted, moving slowly and steadily. Other contestants stared in disbelief. A human, they whispered, was navigating this terrain with a poise they had not expected. Beyond the bridge lay a dense forest of towering plants. Their trunks were smooth and reflective, and their leaves emitted a faint hum. Hidden within were creatures that seemed harmless at first glance, but could change shape or disappear entirely, creating illusions to confuse the participants. Most contestants became frustrated or panicked, chasing after phantoms that did not exist. Daniel, however, paused to observe. He noticed patterns in the illusions, how light reflected differently, how shadows moved, and how sounds were delayed. Using patience and careful observation, he avoided the traps and moved deeper into the forest. As he navigated the forest, Daniel noticed other contestants struggling. Some had fallen into pitfalls. Others were stuck in illusions that made them believe the path was endless. Daniel's human compassion could not ignore their struggles. Despite being a competitor, he carefully helped those he could, pulling them from traps or guiding them through confusing terrain. This earned quiet admiration from some spectators watching from the cliffs above. Even the Queen seemed to notice, her expression unreadable, but her eyes lingering on Daniel longer than on anyone else. The final portion of the trial was a test of emotional strength. Contestants were led to a chamber where their deepest fears and memories were projected as illusions. Daniel entered the space alone. The walls seemed to breathe, showing images of his childhood, moments of failure, and memories of loneliness. Other contestants screamed or fled, unable to face their inner struggles. Daniel, however, stood firm. He allowed himself to feel fear and sadness, but he did not let it control him. He reminded himself of why he was there, not to prove superiority, but to stay true to himself while navigating challenges that demanded both mind and heart. As Daniel confronted his fears, he realized something important. Courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. He faced memories of disappointment, moments when he had doubted himself, and times when he had felt completely alone. Each image tested him, but instead of retreating, he acknowledged them and let them pass. The illusions began to fade one by one until he stood in the center of the chamber, calm and steady. When he emerged from the chamber, the spectators and advisors were astonished. Most competitors had failed at this stage, broken by their fears and doubts. Daniel had not only survived, but had done so with grace and composure. The queen herself stepped forward, her eyes focused on him. "You demonstrate courage that surpasses expectation," she said. "Many beings rely on strength or intimidation. You rely on understanding, patience, and integrity. That is rare." Daniel bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Your Majesty." He replied, "I have learned that fear is part of life. Understanding it and facing it honestly is the only way to move forward." His words, simple yet sincere, resonated in the chamber. The Queen's advisors whispered among themselves, impressed not only by his bravery, but by his clarity of thought and heart. As the day drew to a close, Daniel took a moment to reflect. The trial grounds had tested his physical endurance and emotional resilience. He had faced hazards that seemed impossible to survive, creatures that could confuse and scare, and illusions that forced him to confront his own fears. Yet, he had succeeded not by fighting with strength alone, but by observing, understanding, and acting with compassion. He realized that this trial had taught him something even more important than skill or courage: the importance of staying true to oneself in the face of overwhelming pressure. The alien community began to view Daniel differently. Where there had been skepticism and doubt, there was now quiet admiration. Even some of the strongest and most experienced competitors had begun to respect the human's methodical approach and inner strength. The Queen, though still distant, showed subtle signs of interest, observing Daniel with a mixture of curiosity and approval. That night Daniel rested under the glowing alien sky. The rivers of light reflected softly on his face, and he could hear the gentle hum of the alien flora around him. He thought about the upcoming trials, knowing that the physical and emotional challenges were far from over. Yet, he felt ready. He understood now that success would not come from force alone, but from a combination of courage, wisdom, and heart. As he prepared for the next day, Daniel realized that his journey was no longer just about winning the Queen's challenge. It had become a journey of self-discovery, proving to himself and others that humans were capable of far more than they were often given credit for. The first trial had tested his mind, the second his courage and heart, and the next would demand even more: a combination of diplomacy, strategy, and emotional intelligence. Daniel lay down on the soft glowing ground, looking up at the alien sky. He felt a strange sense of connection to the planet, the Queen, and even the other contestants. Despite being a human in an alien world, he no longer felt out of place. He had faced impossible odds and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined. The journey was far from over, but Daniel knew that he had the strength to continue, step by step, challenge by challenge. For the first time, he allowed himself a small smile, not of pride, but of quiet satisfaction. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown, and had prevailed through patience, compassion, and courage. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he would meet them as he had met the last ones, with determination, focus, and a human heart that refused to give up. The morning after the courage trial, Daniel felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. He had survived the physical and emotional challenges, earning the quiet respect of the alien spectators and advisors. Yet, he knew the final stage would test something different, something deeper. This trial would not only require intelligence and strategy, but also diplomacy, understanding, and insight into the hearts and minds of others. It was the Queen's way of determining whether a contestant could lead, reason, and connect with beings very different from themselves. The contestants were escorted to a vast chamber within the palace. Unlike the glowing forests and floating mountains of the previous trial, this room had an air of solemnity and authority. At its center were representatives from rival alien factions, their expressions stern and skeptical. The challenge was clear. Each contestant had to negotiate a solution to a long-standing dispute using only limited knowledge and minimal guidance. Success would require not only logical thinking, but empathy, intuition, and subtle communication. Many of the contestants approached with confidence, relying on their status, appearance, or previous accomplishments. They spoke loudly, attempting to dominate the negotiations, but their methods quickly failed. The alien representatives refused to yield, and tempers flared. Daniel observed quietly, listening carefully to every word, every gesture, and every hint of emotion. He understood that this trial was not about asserting power. It was about understanding the needs and concerns of others, and finding a solution that could satisfy all parties. As the hours passed, Daniel began to identify patterns. He noticed which representatives were more concerned with reputation, which valued fairness, and which were swayed by logic or emotion. Using these observations, he carefully framed his suggestions, choosing words that emphasized cooperation, mutual respect, and long-term benefits. He did not rush, did not interrupt, and never allowed frustration to guide his actions. Slowly, he began to bridge gaps between the factions, finding points of agreement where others had seen only conflict. The spectators watched in awe. Many had expected the final trial to be dominated by the most physically imposing or intellectually brilliant contestants. Instead, they saw a human, small, calm, and patient, achieving what seemed impossible. Daniel's approach was subtle, but effective. He offered compromises that satisfied both logic and emotion, listened actively to concerns, and adapted his proposals as he learned more about each faction's priorities. Step by step, he built trust, and the previously tense room began to calm. The Queen observed from her throne, her expression unreadable, but her eyes never leaving Daniel. She had seen countless contestants fail at this stage, either through arrogance, impatience, or lack of understanding. Yet, here was a human who had no previous experience with alien politics or diplomacy, guiding the factions toward agreement with grace and skill. Her curiosity deepened, and a faint trace of admiration crossed her face. As the negotiations neared conclusion, Daniel identified a solution that could satisfy all parties. It was not perfect. Nothing could fully resolve centuries of disagreement, but it addressed the most critical concerns and offered a path forward. He presented it calmly, explaining the reasoning and emphasizing the benefits for everyone involved. The factions listened, considered, and finally nodded in agreement. The room erupted in quiet, respectful applause. Daniel had succeeded where so many others had failed. The Queen rose from her throne, her presence commanding immediate attention. "You have done what no other contestant has achieved," she said. "You have demonstrated not only intelligence and courage, but wisdom, patience, and empathy. You have bridged divides that others believed unbridgeable. For this, you have won the final trial." Her words echoed through the chamber, carrying both authority and admiration. Daniel bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he replied. "I only did what I thought was right, and listened to those involved." Understanding and cooperation can often solve what seems impossible. His sincerity and humility resonated in the room, further impressing the Queen and the audience alike. A wave of astonishment swept through the spectators. Many whispered in disbelief, pointing at the human who had conquered every trial with a combination of intelligence, courage, and heart. Some advisors muttered to one another, noting how rare it was to witness such an outcome. Even the strongest competitors, who had relied on brute strength, skill, or reputation, were forced to acknowledge Daniel's remarkable achievements. The Queen stepped down from her throne and approached Daniel, her expression finally softening. She extended her hand, a gesture rarely seen and reserved only for those she truly respected. Daniel took it respectfully. Feeling the weight of the moment, the chamber was silent, every eye fixed on the unlikely human who had won the ultimate challenge. "You have surprised everyone," the Queen said quietly, her voice carrying both warmth and curiosity. "Not because you succeeded, but because you succeeded in a way none of us expected. You approached each challenge with thoughtfulness, humility, and courage. That is rare, even among my own people." Daniel nodded, grateful for her words. He realized that the trial was not just about winning, it was about earning respect, trust, and understanding across worlds. The Queen's reaction surprised many. Instead of pride or arrogance, she showed genuine admiration and curiosity. She seemed to recognize in Daniel a kindred spirit, someone who valued knowledge, empathy, and integrity above all else. Even the advisors and spectators felt the shift. Where there had been doubt and skepticism, there was now admiration and excitement. A human had succeeded, where countless aliens had failed, and the impact would be remembered for generations. As the ceremony concluded, Daniel was led to the center of the chamber, where he received acknowledgement from the Queen herself. The other contestants looked on, some in awe, some in quiet acceptance of their defeat. Daniel's success was not only personal but symbolic, a reminder that courage, intelligence, and heart were not limited by species or appearance. Later in the quiet of the palace gardens, Daniel reflected on the trials he had faced. The first tested his mind, the second tested his courage and heart, and the final trial had tested his ability to connect, understand, and lead. He realized that his journey had transformed him. He was no longer just a human in an alien world. He had become someone capable of bridging gaps, solving problems, and inspiring respect across species. As the alien sun set, casting colors across the palace and gardens, Daniel looked toward the Queen's private quarters. The Queen had been distant and enigmatic throughout the trials, yet now she seemed genuinely interested in him. He felt a mixture of anticipation and curiosity. He had won the trials, but what would come next? How would the Queen respond to the human who had accomplished what no one else could? That evening, Daniel allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. He had faced impossible odds, overcome fear, and proven that intelligence, courage, and empathy could triumph over assumptions and expectations. The galaxy had witnessed something remarkable, a human who had challenged centuries of tradition and succeeded. And yet, as he looked at the glowing horizon, he knew the journey was not over. The Queen's reaction, and what would follow, was still a mystery, one that promised surprises and new discoveries beyond imagination. Daniel lay under the alien sky, feeling a quiet confidence. He had completed the trials, earned respect, and faced challenges that would have defeated many. Yet the greatest mystery remained, how the alien Queen herself would respond to his victory. The air shimmered softly around him, carrying the sense that everything was about to change. For Daniel, the adventure was just beginning. The palace was quiet after the final trial. Daniel had won, surpassing the impossible expectations of everyone who had doubted him. The spectators and advisors had slowly dispersed, still murmuring in disbelief about what a human had achieved. Daniel remained in the grand hall, waiting for the Queen's response. He could feel the weight of history pressing down around him. No human, or any being for that matter, had ever completed all the trials and emerged victorious. The outcome was unprecedented, and the atmosphere was thick with curiosity, awe, and anticipation. Finally, the Queen stepped forward, moving with the same grace and authority she had displayed throughout the trials. Her eyes studied Daniel closely, revealing a mixture of respect, curiosity, and a subtle warmth that few had ever seen from her. She had seen countless competitors fail, some through arrogance, some through fear, and some through lack of understanding. Yet here was a human, small and seemingly fragile, who had completed every challenge with intelligence, courage, and heart. Her reaction, calm yet deliberate, surprised everyone in the chamber. "You have accomplished what no one else could," she said, her voice steady, but carrying a tone of genuine admiration. "You approached each trial not with arrogance or force, but with thoughtfulness, patience, and compassion. That is rare, even among my own people. You have earned more than success. You have earned my respect." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. The hall remained silent, the audience captivated by the unprecedented acknowledgement. Daniel bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he replied. "I only did what seemed right, and tried to understand the challenges as best I could. I am honored that you recognize my efforts." His words were simple, yet they carried the humility and sincerity that had impressed the Queen throughout the trials. She studied him quietly, her gaze softening ever so slightly, as if seeing something in him that went beyond skill and courage. To everyone's surprise, the Queen took a step closer and extended her hand. It was a gesture rarely given, reserved for those she truly respected. Daniel hesitated for only a moment before accepting it. The connection was simple but profound, a silent acknowledgement that something extraordinary had just occurred. The room felt charged with possibility, the air thick with the sense that a new chapter was beginning, not just for Daniel, but for the alien world and its people. After the ceremony, the Queen invited Daniel to walk with her through the palace gardens. The air was soft and fragrant, filled with glowing plants and gently flowing streams. As they walked, she spoke of her surprise at his approach to the trials. "Many have come here seeking my hand, relying on strength, intelligence, or ambition," she said. "Few understand that what matters most is character. You have shown that courage, empathy, and understanding are as powerful as any weapon or skill." Daniel listened carefully, inspired by the sincerity in her words. "I have always believed that challenges are meant to teach," he said, "not just about the world, but about ourselves. I never expected to gain respect from so many, especially someone as wise as you." His honesty touched the Queen in a way few words could. She smiled, a rare and genuine expression, hinting at warmth and curiosity. Over the following days, Daniel and the Queen spent time together learning about each other's worlds. She shared stories of her people, their traditions, and the responsibilities of leadership. Daniel in turn described life on Earth, the humans' triumphs and struggles, and his personal journey. Their conversations flowed naturally, bridging not just the gap of species, but the gap of perspective and experience. The Queen, once distant and enigmatic, began to reveal her own humor, vulnerability, and fascination with Daniel's unique human perspective. The alien community watched these interactions closely. They had expected a typical victor's relationship, perhaps distant or purely ceremonial, but instead they saw genuine curiosity and respect growing between a human and their queen. Some spectators whispered in awe, others in disbelief, but all recognized that this was something exceptional. Daniel had not only completed the trials, he had changed perceptions, bridging worlds in a way that no one had thought possible. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel and the Queen grew closer. They shared meals, explored the palace and the surrounding lands, and discussed ideas ranging from governance to philosophy. The Queen's advisors noticed a shift in her demeanor. Where she had once been solely focused on duty and protocol, she now displayed genuine affection and interest in the human who had defied expectations. Daniel, too, felt a deepening connection. He admired her intelligence, grace, and the subtle ways she challenged him to think differently. One evening, under the alien sky filled with shifting colors and luminous stars, the Queen turned to Daniel. "You have surprised me in ways I did not expect," she said softly. "Not just in the trials, but in your persistence, your humility, and your heart. I see in you something rare, something I had not thought possible in one of your kind." Daniel looked at her, understanding the depth of her words. He realized that winning the trials had been only the beginning. The real journey was forming, a bond built on trust, respect, and shared discovery. The story of Daniel's victory spread throughout the planet. Aliens of all kinds spoke of the human who had completed impossible trials, not through brute force or arrogance, but through intelligence, courage, and empathy. He became a symbol of possibility, showing that assumptions about species, strength, or tradition could be challenged and overcome. The Queen's reaction, measured yet genuine, became a lesson in leadership and fairness. She demonstrated that admiration and respect are earned through character, not status or power. As Daniel settled into his new life among the aliens, he reflected on his journey. He had faced challenges that seemed impossible, confronted fears he had never imagined, and navigated situations that tested every part of his being. And through it all, he had remained true to himself, observant, patient, courageous, and compassionate. In doing so, he had not only earned the Queen's respect, but had forged a connection that transcended worlds. The human and the alien queen walked side by side through the palace gardens, the glowing plants casting soft light around them. They talked, laughed, and learned from one another, bridging gaps that had seemed unbridgeable. Daniel knew that the trials had changed him, teaching lessons far beyond the tests themselves. And as he looked at the Queen, he understood that this was only the beginning, an adventure of discovery, mutual respect, and unexpected bonds that could reshape the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. For Daniel, the journey had begun with curiosity and courage, and it had led to a moment that no one had anticipated. He had faced the impossible, won the Queen's trials, and discovered that respect, understanding, and heart could transcend species, worlds, and expectations. In the quiet of the alien night, he felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that he had not only achieved victory, but had also opened the door to something extraordinary, a connection between human and alien, built on trust, admiration, and the endless possibilities of discovery. The galaxy would remember Daniel, the human who won the alien queen's challenge, not just for his success, but for the way he approached it with patience, humility, courage, and a heart that refused to give up. And for Daniel, the greatest reward was not the triumph itself, but the bond he had formed and the knowledge that understanding, respect, and kindness could indeed change the universe.